Well, consider the plight of a hiker who goes on a day trip into the woods and gets completely lost. Her cell phone has died. She's gotten so twisted around she doesn't know what trail she's on. She's walking in circles. She has no food with her, no warm clothing, and certainly no tools for making a fire. As the sun makes its arc in the sky and heads toward the horizon, it dawns on her that she is going to be spending the night out in the wilderness. Now imagine how this lost hiker feels when the last ray of sunlight dims in the west. As the darkness closes in, she begins to hear strange noises all around her. Was that a wolf howling in the distance? Was that nearby scratching sound a bear? What other animals are roaming in the night? And she shivers, and then she realizes she has another problem. The temperature has dropped, and she's having trouble staying warm. And the darkness is so thick that she knows no one will find her on this night, if they are even looking for her. Now, if you've ever been stranded like this, you can relate to the fear and loneliness that she is feeling. The anger at having gotten herself into this mess. The weeping may last through the night. But oh, the joy she will feel when the light of morning comes, especially when that light reveals she's only a few hundred yards away from a road that will lead her back home. When our world feels enclosed in darkness, we can quickly give in to fear and despair. But it is at these times that God gives us a promise. Joy comes in the morning. May I gently remind you of something that you already know? Life is not easy. That's not pessimism, it's fact. That's not a complaint. It's just the way things are. I don't like it, neither do you. But the reality is that life turns every person upside down. Many years ago, Deanlin and I decided to be adventurous and ride the rapids of the Rio Grande. We drove to the designated spot and met the guide. His instructions were foreboding. He began by telling us what we should do when we fell into the water. He went on to guide what to do when the boat flipped over and when we were floating downstream. At one point, I elbowed Deanlin and I whispered, "Notice he doesn't say if." Neither did Jesus. He didn't say, "In this world you may have trouble," or "In this world some will have trouble." No, he assured us, in this world, you will have trouble. If you have pulse, you will have pain. If you are a person, you will have problems. At times, you might fear you won't get through those trials. You will worry that the depression will never lift, or the yelling will never stop, or the pain will never leave. You wonder if God has a word for the dark nights of your soul. Does He have a promise for you? He does, and it begins with this phrase: weeping may last through the night. Of course, you knew that much already. Weeping can last through the night. Just ask the widow in the cemetery, or the man who lost his job, or the teenager who lost her way. Weeping may last through the night, and the next night, and the next. That is not news to you. But the next part may be, joy comes with the morning. Despair will not rule the day. The clouds may eclipse the sun, but they cannot eliminate it. Night might prolong the dawn, but it cannot defeat it. Morning comes. Not as quickly as you want or as dramatically as you desire, but morning comes. And with it comes joy. Do you need this promise? Do you wonder if morning will ever bring this night to an end? Mary Magdalene did. In the forest of the New Testament, she is the weeping willow. She is the one upon whom tragedy cast its coldest winter. A brief note in 2 of the Gospels reveals a fascinating detail about her early life. She had been possessed by 7 demons. She was a prisoner of 7 afflictions. What might this list include? Depression? Loneliness? Shame? Fear? Perhaps she was a recluse or a prostitute. Maybe she had been abused or abandoned. The number 7 is sometimes used in the Bible to describe completeness. It could be that Mary Magdalene was completely consumed with troubles. But then something happened. Jesus stepped into her world. He spoke and the demons fled. And for the first time in a long time, the oppressive forces were gone, banished, evicted. Mary Magdalene could sleep well, eat enough, and smile again. The face in the mirror wasn't anguished. Jesus restored life to her life, and she reciprocated. She was among the female followers who were contributing from their own resources to support Jesus and his disciples. So wherever Jesus went, Mary Magdalene followed. She heard him teach. She saw him perform miracles. She helped pay expenses. She may have even prepared his meals. She was always near Christ, even at his crucifixion. When they pounded the nails in his hands, she heard the hammer. And when they pierced his side with a spear, she saw the blood. And when they lowered his body from the cross, she was there to close his eyes. So it's not surprising that she wants to be there again at his burial. In the early morning mist, she arises, takes her spices and aloes, and leaves her house, and walks past the gate of Ginneth and up the hillside. A gray sky gives way to gold as she walks up the narrow trail. As she rounds the final bend, she gasps. The rock in front of the grave is pushed back, and she assumes that grave robbers have taken the body. And she hurries back down the trail until she finds Peter and John. They've taken away the Lord out of the tomb, she tells them. The disciples rush to see for themselves, and she tries to keep up with them but can't. John is faster, but Peter is bolder. He steps inside. John follows him. Peter sees the empty slab and stares, but John sees the empty slab and believes. The evidence all came together for him. The resurrection prophecies, the removed stone, the linen wrappings, the headcloth folded and placed. John did the math. No one took Jesus' body. No one robbed the grave. Jesus rose from the dead. John looked and believed, and Easter had its first celebrant. Peter and John hurry off to tell the others. Now, we expect the camera lens of the gospel to follow them. We expect the gospel writer to describe what they did next, but he doesn't. Instead, he tells the story of the one who remained behind. Her face is awash with tears. Her shoulders heave with sobs. She feels all alone. But something tells her she is not. Whatever the reason, she stoops down and sticks her head into the hewn entrance of the tomb. And she waits for her eyes to adjust to the light. And when they do, she sees two figures that look to be like men, but are radiantly white. And they say to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" Well, Mary's world had officially hit rock bottom. Her master was murdered, his body buried in a borrowed grave, his tomb robbed, his body stolen, and now two strangers are sitting on the slab where his body had been laid. Sorrow intermingles with anger. Have you ever had a moment like this? A moment in which bad news became worse? In which the sadness wrapped around you like a fog? If so, you're going to love what happened next. In the midst of Mary's darkest moment, the sun came out. John tells us, at this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. Well, she didn't recognize her Lord, so Jesus did something about it. He called her by name, Mary. And when she heard the voice, she knew the source. In a second, in the pivot of the neck, in the amount of time it took her to rotate her head from this way to that, her world went from a dead Jesus to a living one. She threw her arms around him. We know this to be true because of the next words Jesus said. "Don't hold on to me, because I have not yet gone up to the Father." Maybe she fell at his feet and held his ankles. Maybe she threw her arms around his shoulders and held him close. We don't know how she held him, We just know she did, and Jesus let her do so. How wonderful that the resurrected Lord was not too holy, too otherly, too divine, too supernatural to be embraced. This moment serves a sacred role in the Easter story. It reminds us that Jesus is the conquering King and the Good Shepherd. He has power over death, but he also has a soft spot for the Mary Magdalenes of the world. Of all the people to whom Jesus could have spoken, he chose to go first to Mary, the weeping, heartbroken woman who once had 7 demons. Why? Why her? No epistle bears her name. No New Testament story describes her work. Why did Jesus create this moment for Mary Magdalene? Perhaps to send this promise to all the heavy-hearted people. Weeping may last through the night, but joy comes with the morning. Weeping comes to all of us. Heartaches leave us with tear-streaked faces and heavy hearts. Darkness comes, but so does the morning. Sadness comes, but so does hope. Sorrow may have the night, but it cannot have our lives. Joy comes because Jesus comes. And if you don't recognize his face, he'll call your name. So watch for it. Expect it like you would the morning sunrise. Keep coming to Jesus, even though the trail is dark, even though the sun seems to sleep, even though everyone else is silent. You walk to Jesus and find your joy in this unshakable promise from God.